Tonight, a 22-year-old case of a missing man, one step closer now to being solved thanks to Google Maps.
The facts around this case are pretty bizarre.
Look closely. The image from Google Earth reveals a car submerged in the pond in Wellington, Florida.
You know, today, it's just unbelievable. You can get caught when you don't even know somebody's watching.
Google Maps has changed how we explore the world. Every month, over 1 billion people use it to get directions. But sometimes people see things on maps that can only be described as disturbing. Like this photo, which someone called the freakiest image on Google Maps. This picture looked like an army of zombies standing in a field, but the mystery was quickly solved when they realized that the army of zombies was actually a scarecrow art exhibition in Finland. This is just one of the many mysteries Google Maps has been involved in. Over the years, it's helped detect crimes, find missing people, and put criminals behind bars. Today, we'll explore the strangest mysteries solved with Google Maps and Google Earth, which is a slightly more advanced version of Maps. We'll start with the lighter stuff and end with the more disturbing cases. My name is Visual Venture. Hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. The mystery of the mad mechanic. In June 2014, someone found a picture on Google Maps that was so disturbing, they decided to pick up the phone and tell the police about it. But what kind of image could send someone running to the cops?
Now, look down the road past that light blue car on the right. Move one step closer here and a man appears to be looming over another.
Looking at the image from a different angle paints a darker picture.
Let's get right next to them, and it appears the man in light red overalls is face down, spread-eagled. Drive past, and you can see the other man appears to have an axe in his hand.
This weird photo was taken by Google Street View. Street View began in 2007 to create a 360-degree map of the world. Google used cars with mounted cameras to drive around and take pictures of streets. These images were then uploaded online to create street maps. After seeing this picture, the police had one question: what happened to this man? Luckily, Google Maps pinpointed the location of the photo, so the cops knew where to go. They traced the picture to a car repair shop along Giles Street in Leith, Edinburgh. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they couldn't believe the story they heard. In August 2012, two mechanics, Gary Kerr and Dan Thompson, were fixing cars in their repair shop when they noticed the Google car coming along the road, so they decided to have some fun. One mechanic, Dan Thompson, laid on the ground pretending to be unconscious, while the other, Gary Kerr, stood next to him holding a pickaxe handle. Thompson said it was the spur of the moment. It seemed like the obvious thing to do, so I threw myself on the ground and Gary grabbed the pickaxe handle from the garage. When the Google car passed, it took a picture of that confusing scene. Over a year later, someone saw the picture on Google Maps, thought it was a real attack, and called the police.
According to Edinburgh Evening News, Thompson was mortified when police showed up. He says the officers were actually impressed and left laughing.
The cops realized it was a prank and no crimes were committed. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for our next story because it forced the police to launch a manhunt: the mystery of the vanishing van. Cars don't just vanish. If a car disappears, it means someone took it. That's exactly what David Soanes thought when he realized his trailer was no longer parked in his driveway.
I thought, where's the caravan gone?
Instead of finding the trailer, called a caravan here, parked in the driveway, there was nothing.
The theft happened in June 2009 after Mr. Soanes left the family home for just 1 hour. He installed a car alarm and a wheel clamp to prevent anyone from driving it away. But despite those security measures, someone had stolen the van in broad daylight between 9:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. The only thing the thief left behind were the wheel clamps that were used to secure the caravan.
And then suddenly, it dawned on me, it's gone. Then you had that awful sinking feeling.
Weeks after reporting the theft, the police had no leads. David thought he would never hear about the stolen caravan again. David's luck was about to change. 9 months after the theft, in March 2010, David's 11-year-old son was checking out the Google Street View pictures of his home when he stumbled upon a surprising clue.
Everyone was looking at their house addresses, and then I looked at mine, and then mine was just different because I had a man that I didn't know standing on my driveway.
It turns out that by a massive stroke of luck, the Google mapping car had passed by the house as the robbery was taking place. Google snapped a picture of a large, bald man with spectacles standing next to a green SUV on their driveway. This image helped them finally understand how the thief moved the caravan.
And the man had an SUV with him. suspected of being the vehicle he'd used to tow the trailer away.
David took the pictures to the cops. If the police could find the green SUV in the image, they'd find the thief. The problem was, Google blurred the license plate of the thief's car due to their privacy policy. The case dragged on for months and months while the police tried to convince Google to unblur the mystery man's plate number.
I can't understand why Google can't just release it.
It took a year for Google to unblur the picture, but that delay messed up the investigation. By the time the cops got the license plate, the suspect sold his green SUV, making it harder to locate him. However, the police didn't give up, and 3 years after the caravan was stolen, the police tracked down the thief and arrested him. This next mystery is about a thief whose stash of stolen items was so huge it could be seen from space. The mystery of Bicycle Mountain. The mystery of Bicycle Mountain began with a rat infestation in Littlemore, Oxford, England. This sudden rat problem was surprising because the neighborhood was pretty clean. However, it didn't take long for everyone to realize where the rats were coming from. A 54-year-old man in the neighborhood stacked a pile of bicycles in his backyard. This pile of bicycles was so huge and messy that it became a breeding ground for the rats that terrorized the area. One of the angry neighbors was Colleen Butler, a 53-year-old resident who's been living on the same street for 32 years. Colleen was more upset than anyone because she lived right next door to this mountain of bikes. Describing the situation, Colleen complained, "I've had rats, I've had arguments with him and other neighbors. I had my fence blown down and people were rude to me because they assumed that I own the bicycles. It has caused me so much anxiety." When Colleen confronted the man about the bicycles, he gave her what sounded like a reasonable explanation. He told Colleen the bikes were stashed to be sent to Africa for needy kids. Although Colleen believed him at first, she quickly realized he was lying because those bikes were never shipped. The pile just kept increasing by the week. After talking to the man, it didn't work, Colleen decided to report her bike hoarding neighbor to the local council. However, the reply she got from the council only added insult to injury. Colleen said, "I called the local council about the rat problems caused by the bikes and I ended up paying for the pest control myself. The council told me that rats don't nest in bicycles." At one point, Colleen considered selling her house and moving away. However, the bicycles also ruined that plan as well. She explained, "It's devaluing my house. Who's gonna wanna buy my house with all of that next door?" The situation continued for about 5 years. The heap of bikes kept increasing while the rat problem escalated into a full-blown health hazard. No one still could figure out why this man had a bunch of bikes in his backyard. Eventually, the neighbors pressured the cops to intervene. The first thing the cops did was use Google Earth to assess the situation. Images on Google Earth are taken by cameras on satellites, like an eye in the sky. Users can zero in on any spot on Earth and see the highest resolution images that they have available. When the cops checked, images of the street showed a dark mass covering the man's backyard. The mountain of 500 bikes so large they can be seen from a Google Earth satellite. The cops began investigating and found out that the bikes were coming in by van loads, with people bringing them most nights and during daytime. Eventually, the police raided the house and arrested the man on suspicion of handling stolen goods and possession of criminal property. Colleen looked out her bedroom window and saw the cops raiding her neighbor's home. She felt relieved and thought, great, something is finally being done. After the man was arrested, the police released the photos of the bicycle on social media and started the process of identifying the true owners of the bicycles. So why was this old man keeping stolen bikes in his backyard? No one ever truly knew. However, his neighbor Colleen concluded the bicycle man might have some mental issues, stating that she's had conversations with him, but everything he tells her doesn't come true. He lives in cloud cuckoo land. The criminals in our next mystery managed to hide a large-scale illegal operation in plain sight. Now it's time to dive into the more serious mysteries. The mystery of the secret cornfield. Farming is one of the oldest and most respected jobs in history. But what happens when you run a farm by criminals? In 2004, a gang of criminals bought land and started a farm in Switzerland. But this was no ordinary farm. This farm was growing pot. The plan was to grow and sell their product nationwide, making tons of money in the process. But for this plan to work, the gangsters had to keep their massive 2-acre pot farm hidden from the cops. And they knew just how to do it. They surrounded their pot farm with a field of corn. Anyone standing at the edge of the farm could only see rows of tall, green corn stalks. The cops could walk into the farm and not realize what was hidden among the cornfields. This trick worked. For 4 years, between 2004 and 2008, the gang grew and shipped 7 tons of product around the country, raking in about 3 to 10 million francs a year, which is roughly 8.7 million US dollars. Swiss cops saw the product on the streets but didn't know where it was from. They knew it wasn't coming through the borders. The assumption was that it was being grown somewhere inside their country. But where? In 2009, Swiss officers were using Google Earth to find the addresses of a couple of farmers suspected of being dealers. But then they saw something weird. They noticed a massive 2-acre large plantation hidden in a field of corn. And when they zoomed in a little more, bingo, it was a pot plantation clear as day on Google Earth. The police raided the farm, arrested 16 people, and seized 11.1 tons of the product. They also found cash and valuables worth 900,000 Swiss francs, which is about 780,000 US dollars. All the cases so far involve people who are alive and well. In this next chapter, we'll see how Google Maps solved a mystery about someone who passed away almost 10 years before it was invented. The mystery of the murky pond. On November 7, 1997, a 40-year-old man walked out of a Florida nightclub and was never seen again. His name was William Moult, and he was seen driving away from the nightclub just before midnight. William also called his girlfriend from the club, saying that he would be home soon, but that was the last time they ever spoke because he never made it back. A missing person investigation was launched by police, but the case went cold. There was no sign of a car crash or a carjacking, and there was no record of William going through an airport or crossing the US border. How could a man and his car vanish without a trace? For 22 years, William's friends and family had no idea what happened to him. That was until August 2019, when someone using Google Earth noticed something strange in a large pond in Wellington, Florida.
I noticed something on Google Maps when I zoomed in. It kind of looked a little bit like a car.
The police were called, and soon they were pulling a white sedan out of the pond.
Erica, and she had even added a little video where she showed they had actually pulled the car out of the canal.
After they got the car out, they found the skeletal remains of Mr. Moult inside.
The 40-year-old's clothing and personal belongings were all intact.
The sheriff's office concluded that Moult had probably lost control of his vehicle and driven into the pond that night.
22 years. The bones were still intact, still in the seatbelt. That's crazy.
No one noticed the car was underwater during the first investigation 22 years ago. But as time passed, a shift in the water made the car visible to Google Earth satellites.
On the Google images, it looked so clear. But when you actually stand next to one of these man-made lakes, they're typically brown or green, and it's almost impossible to see what's in the water.
William Moult wasn't the only missing person found with Google Maps. This next person vanished for 20 years, except he wasn't missing, he was hiding. The mystery of the mafia chef. 60-year-old Manuel Mormino was a popular chef who cooked delicious Italian food in Galapagos, Spain. Manuel had a lovely wife and owned a grocery store in the area. However, Manuel wasn't who everyone thought he was. He fooled the entire town. Before he was a lovable chef, Manuel's name was Gioacchino Gumino, and he was the boss of the Stidda Mafia group in Sicily. There are many mafia gangs in Italy. However, the Stidda Mafia group was one of the most ruthless. The Stidda Mafia was founded by former members of other mafia families who were kicked out for disobedience. Therefore, the Stidda Mafia didn't care about honor. Their only focus was making money through crime. During his time in the Stidda Mafia, Gumino gained a reputation for being extremely tough and merciless. He once ended the life of an innocent man who he mistakenly thought was part of a rival mafia gang. Gumino was also very skilled at hiding from police and evading capture, but his luck ran out in 1998 when he was arrested in Barcelona and sent to Italy to serve a life sentence. However, Gumino had no intention of staying behind bars. Within 4 years of his imprisonment, Gumino found a way to break out of jail. Gumino escaped in 2002 when a film crew was shooting a movie in the prison. During filming, an alarm sounded because another inmate was trying to climb over a wall. While the guards were trying to catch the prisoner that was climbing the wall, Gumino made his move. He quickly slipped into a crowd of inmates, visitors, movie staff, and film extras who were rushing rushing out of the prison gate. Prison guards noticed within hours that Gamino was missing, and the Italian media reported on his escape the next day. The Italian police organized a large-scale manhunt across Italy, but no one could find Gamino. He seemed to vanish without a trace. Gamino's friends helped him travel to Spain, where he began a new life. He changed his name to Manuel and began working as a restaurant chef.
He establishes himself in another country just outside of Madrid. He changes his name, he gets married, he works as a chef. Italians, we like to eat, we're chefs.
However, the Italian police never stopped searching for Gamino. They heard he was hiding in Spain, but didn't know where. Then, nearly 20 years after Gamino's escape, the cops got a big break. The Google Street View car was driving through the Spanish town of Galapagar when it captured an image of two men chatting outside a fruit and vegetable shop. Italian police believed one of the men closely resembled Gamino, but they wanted to be sure. After some digging, they found something that convinced them the man in the picture was Gamino. The police stumbled upon a Facebook page of a Galapagar restaurant.
Cocina de Manu, meaning Manu's Kitchen. Here it is back in 2018, also on Google Street View.
On the restaurant's Facebook page, there was a picture of Gamino dressed in a chef's uniform standing next to a wood-burning pizza oven. As the police zoomed into the chef's photo, they noticed a scar on the left side of his chin. When they checked Gioacchino Gamino's mugshots, he also had a scar in the same place. Police used age progression technology on an old photo of Mr. Gamino to get a sense of what the fugitive would have looked like after 20 years. The face that the computer generated looked exactly like Chef Manuel Mormino. Italian cops contacted the Spanish police unit that hunts fugitives, and on December 17th, 2001, Gioacchino Gamino was arrested while he was walking on the street.
An Italian mafia boss who's been on the run for decades has been arrested after he was spotted on Google Maps in Spain.
As the cops led Gamino away, he screamed, "How did you find me? I haven't even called my family for 10 years. After 20 years on the run, Google Maps put a notorious fugitive back behind bars to serve his life sentence. But while Gamino was surrounded by gangsters, the person in our next mystery allegedly committed a horrible crime in one of the safest cities in America. The mystery of the toxic lovers. When people get married, they promise to love and protect each other for life. But for Brad and Nancy Cooper, marriage was full of secrets, dangers, and betrayal. Nancy and Brad first met in 1999 when they were both working for IBM in Canada. Within a year, their office friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. But although it seemed like a typical love story, Mary had a specific reason for dating Brad. A reason that would come back to haunt her many years later. Nancy only chose Brad because someone else broke her heart. Nancy always dated popular, outgoing men, but after her last relationship with a successful Canadian businessman ended in heartbreak, Nancy decided to play it safe, and Brad was the safe choice. Brad was quiet, reserved, and pretty boring, but Nancy told her sister Brad felt safer and that she thought he could give her children and a steady life. In October 2000, Nancy and Brad got married in a small restaurant in Canada. Soon after, they moved to America because Brad got a job at Cisco. Nancy and Brad had big dreams as they settled into their new home in Cary, North Carolina. Unfortunately, those dreams would become nightmares just 2 years into their marriage. The first sign of trouble came in 2002 when Nancy went to visit her family in Canada. Nancy told them she was bored and unhappy in North Carolina and didn't want to go back. Her biggest problem was that as a Canadian citizen, she couldn't work in the US without a work visa. And being unable to make her own money, Nancy was frustrated with her loss of independence. It was also difficult for her family to send her money because she didn't have a social security number to open a bank account. Nancy only decided to return to the US because Brad came to Canada and begged her to go back with him. When they got back to Cary, things seemed okay for a while. Between 2004 and 2006, they had 2 daughters, and Nancy was able to earn a bit of her own money by working as a nanny. However, by early 2008, the old problems had returned, except this time, Nancy realized that all her problems were because of her husband, Brad. First, she discovered that Brad had never applied for her work visa, intentionally making her unable to work and dependent on him. He also cut her off of their credit cards and removed her name from their bank accounts. Brad's explanation for cutting Nancy off was that she was spending more money than they could afford, and he wanted her to be financially responsible. There was one more issue that damaged their marriage beyond repair. Nancy found out that Brad was having an affair with several women, including a neighbor. That neighbor was one of Nancy's closest friends. That's when Nancy decided to cut her losses, divorce Brad, and move back to Canada with the kids. But after being jobless for nearly 8 years, Nancy was in a tough spot. A lawyer told her that if she left the house, she could lose everything, possibly even custody of her daughters. Brad didn't want a divorce, and Nancy's desire to leave only made him more controlling. Brad hacked Nancy's email to read her messages, eavesdropped on her phone calls, and hid the children's passports to stop them from leaving the country. Brad also filled up her car with a limited amount of gas to ensure she could never get farther away than he wanted her to. At that point, the atmosphere at home was very tense. Nancy slept in a separate room with the bedroom door locked and always had her keys in her pocket. On the evening of July 11, 2008, Nancy and Brad attended a neighbor's barbecue with their 2 young daughters. However, the relationship was so strained that they ended up arguing in front of everyone at the party. After a couple of hours, the barbecue ended and everyone left. But as the residents of Cary fell asleep that night, they didn't realize their neighborhood would become one big crime scene the next morning. The next day was Saturday, July 12, 2008. Nancy had plans to meet a friend at 8 a.m. However, Nancy never showed up to that meeting. It wasn't like Nancy to miss plans. After waiting a few hours, a worried friend called Nancy's home to check on her. Nancy wasn't home, but Brad answered. He said Nancy had gone jogging and never returned, and that's when everyone started getting worried.
Saturday morning at 7 a.m., her husband says she left their home in the upscale Lockmere neighborhood and went for a jog. She's not been seen since.
The police were called, and within hours, they had launched a search for Nancy.
Along suburban streets and in wilderness areas, dozens of friends and neighbors of Nancy Cooper fanned out across Cary today. They are looking for a wife and mother who just vanished.
Hundreds of volunteers and law enforcement authorities got involved searching for Nancy Cooper by land, air, and water, and distributing thousands of flyers around Cary.
The search for a missing Cary woman is intensifying tonight. Friends, family, and police are desperately searching for 34-year-old Nancy Cooper.
Despite their best efforts, they couldn't find Nancy. Nancy's family flew in from Canada and asked for help at the press conference.
We believe that she will be brought home soon, and we thank the community for the support they've given, and ask that they continue in their effort to help find our daughter.
Interestingly, Brad wasn't at the press conference with his missing wife's family. The search continued the next day, but still they found nothing. On July 14th, 2008, 2 days after Nancy disappeared, a man walking his dog saw a body floating in a drainage ditch about 3 miles from Nancy's house. The man noticed the body because of the vultures hanging around.
They said he called 911 around 7:30 to report seeing a person floating in the pond. The Wake County Sheriff's Office is handling the investigation.
It was Nancy, and she was gone. The news of Nancy's passing rocked the city. After her body was found, many turned to Brad as the obvious suspect. But there was no evidence to prove that. Police got a search warrant for Brad's home and vehicles. They also collected a DNA sample from him. However, over 2 months after Nancy's murder, no one had been charged.
They took his DNA, they searched the home, they put crime scene tape around the home. If they think they've got their guy, if they think he had something to do with it, what are they waiting for?
And then in October 2008, after 3 months of police investigations, Brad was arrested. Brad's arrest meant that the police found evidence that pointed to Brad as the culprit. The public didn't know what this evidence was, but they would soon find out. Brad's trial began in March 2011. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence of Brad's financial control and extramarital affairs. However, the main evidence against Brad was what the cops discovered in his browsing history of his computer.
Prosecutors say Brad Cooper had maps on his computer of the exact location of his wife's body where it was found.
Brad swore he'd never been to the spot Nancy's body was found and didn't know anything about it except what he'd seen on the news. However, Brad's browser history showed that he did a Google Maps search of the area on his laptop the day before Nancy went missing, zooming in to that exact spot where she was found.
You cannot explain that away. This is 12 hours before his wife is, and he's zooming in on where his wife's body was eventually found.
Prosecutors told the jury what they believed really happened to Nancy Cooper. Brad planned the crime a few days before and used Google Maps to choose a place to hide her. Then on July 11th, after the family returned from the party shortly after midnight, Brad ended Nancy's life at home and drove his car to drop her there. Brad then returned home to use Nancy's phone to fake a phone call to make it appear she was still alive. Therefore, Nancy never went jogging that morning because she was already in the ditch. However, Brad's lawyers had a different explanation for the Google Maps search. They said it was planted on the computer by investigators to frame Brad. The lawyers argued that an IT expert like Brad wouldn't leave a piece of evidence like the Google Maps search on a laptop if he had truly committed the crime. They also addressed the issues of financial control, saying Brad had to take drastic financial measures to compensate for his wife's overspending, so he took her name off their accounts to put her on a cash allowance to keep the family from financial ruin. Another surprising revelation from the defense was that Nancy herself also cheated on Brad with a neighbor, and her second daughter was born 8 months and 24 days after that affair. Their final point was that the police were so bent on making Brad the prime suspect that they overlooked details that might have led them to a different theory. However, the jury was not convinced by their defense. Jurors came back with a unanimous verdict: guilty. Brad was sentenced to life behind bars, but even with Brad in jail, this story was far from over. 2 years later, in April 2013, the State Court of Appeals overturned the verdict, saying that Brad did not get a fair trial. They said this because the judge refused to let a computer expert testify that the Google Maps evidence had been planted on Brad's computer.
The fact that I had not only one, but two witnesses prepared to say that these maps were planted on that computer would have made all the difference in the world.
A new trial was ordered. Then in September 2014, while awaiting retrial, Brad did something that destroyed his chance at freedom. Brad pleaded guilty and accepted a plea deal for a shorter sentence. Brad was sentenced to 12 to 15 years, and he relinquished the parenting rights of his daughters so they could be adopted by Nancy's twin sister, Krista. Brad was released in 2020 and was deported to Canada because he wasn't a US citizen. Even though he pleaded guilty before the second trial, many people believed Brad is innocent and he was framed with Google Maps. An anonymous blogger who runs a website called Justice for Brad Cooper wrote, "It's quite painful to hear Brad Cooper plead guilty, knowing that all the evidence points to his innocence." Our final mystery is the most disturbing and complicated. Investigators spent nearly 1,000 hours to solve it. The mystery of the anonymous video. On July 10th, 2018, a 2-minute video went viral on the internet. But unlike other virals that make people laugh, this one contained footage that someone described as one of the worst videos they've ever seen. The blurry video begins with soldiers leading 2 women across a dusty field. It isn't clear exactly where they're headed. As they walk, the soldiers accuse the women of being part of a rebel group that's been causing trouble in the area.
The soldiers accuse them of belonging to the jihadist group, Boko Haram.
The video ends with the soldiers taking the women's life. Unfortunately, apart from a few nicknames and faces captured in the video, nobody knew when or where the footage was recorded, who the soldiers were, or even which country they served. But one thing was certain: this was a crime. The video caused public outrage, and there were calls for those responsible to be punished. But punishing the culprits was going to be difficult when nobody knew where this atrocity took place. Some people on social media claimed that the incident occurred in Mali, while others claimed that the incident occurred in Cameroon. However, the governments of both Cameroon and Mali quickly came out to deny these accusations. Cameroon's Minister of Communication released an official statement saying the soldiers in the video were not wearing the right gear or carrying the right weapons to be members of the Cameroonian army. At that point, it was obvious no one would own up to this crime. That's when a team of BBC reporters decided to solve the mystery themselves and bring the culprits to justice. To do that, they had to figure out 3 things: where it happened, when it happened, and who is responsible. All the reporters had to go on was this viral video, but after watching it many times, they spotted some clues that could help them geolocate it. Geolocating something means figuring out exactly where it is on Earth. Just Just like using a map to find a location, geolocating uses different tools to pinpoint a specific place. These tools could be things like GPS, which tracks locations using satellites or even clues in pictures or videos. BBC reporters turned to Google Earth to help them with the geolocation. The first step was figuring out where the crime took place, and the best way to do that was to look at the scenery of the video.
But the first 40 seconds of the film capture a mountain range with a distinctive profile.
Using Google Earth, they found one place that perfectly matched the mountains in the clip. It was near a town called Zelivit in the north of Cameroon, near the border with Nigeria. Now that they had an idea of the general area, they used Google Earth to pinpoint exactly where the incident happened.
The video also reveals other details that can be matched precisely to what we see on the satellite imagery. This track, these buildings, and these trees.
After reviewing all the data, they were sure that the incident took place in Cameroon. Step 2 was figuring out when it happened, and that was more complicated. The reporters studied every landmark, building, and tree in the video. Then they compared it to Google Earth satellite images of the area from 2013 to 2018.
The video contains clues. This building is visible on satellite imagery, but only until February 2016. The must have happened before that date.
The reporters concluded the video must have been filmed sometime between 2015 and early 2016. They figured out the year, but they still needed to find the exact month.
The video also reveals this footpath, a path that only appears in the hot, dry season between January and April.
Using the angle and direction of the sun, they narrowed down the time frame to between March 20th and April 5th, 2015. Now the only question left was, who were those soldiers? A tip from Amnesty International pointed out the soldiers' uniforms and insignia strongly suggested that they were Cameroonian. To confirm their suspicions, the reporters looked up Cameroonian army members on Facebook. While they were doing this, the Cameroonian government suddenly issued a press statement.
After weeks of denying that these took place in Cameroon, Bakari announced that 7 members of the Cameroonian military had been arrested and were under investigation.
Using the government's list of potential suspects, BBC narrowed their Facebook search, and soon they found the profiles of 3 men who appeared in the video.
One of them is this man, introduced at the start of the film as Chocho.
Voilà le caporal chef, Chocho.
We found a Facebook profile that links the nickname Chocho to a soldier called Syriac Bitiala.
But there's even more evidence on Facebook. The journalists stumbled on photos of Cameroonian soldiers in uniforms matching those in the video. 2 months after the video went viral, the BBC team released a documentary revealing what they had discovered. The BBC also presented their findings to the Cameroonian government. Confronted with so much evidence, the government finally acknowledged that the video was carried out by Cameroonian soldiers.
We put these findings to the government of Cameroon, who responded.
7 soldiers were arrested, disarmed. They are under investigation right now. I can confirm that all the 7 of them are in prison.
Google Maps has helped us uncover hidden crimes and solve unusual mysteries. It's a powerful tool for finding the truth. We can't help but wonder what other secrets are waiting to be discovered. Visual Venture. Wait, before you go, make sure you guys click subscribe here and then click this playlist to watch more dark internet documentaries, because our goal is 700,000 subscribers by the end of 2024. I love you guys a ton. Peace.